Hello and welcome to today's webinar, Reopening Facilities and Maintaining Proper IAQ to Minimize Airborne Exposure. Today we will have Frank DiPaolo and Eddie Kelly present. I appreciate you joining us today. My name is Ron Pilkowitz. Because we know you will want to watch this webinar again, it will be recorded and posted to Belimo's YouTube site. And please know we will have a question and answer session at the end of this presentation, and we'd like to hear from you. I invite you at any time to type your questions into the question box and I will read them aloud during the question and answer session. Eddie and Frank will answer as many questions as we have time for, but please know if they do not get to your question, they will answer it via email afterwards. If you are having any difficulty, please simply type me in. I would now like to turn the presentation right over to Eddie. Thank you, Eddie.
All right, thanks, Ron. Good day, everyone, and thanks for joining us today as we speak about indoor air quality and specifically ASHRAE's recommendations on how to safely reopen your facilities while going through the proper channels to really try and mitigate and minimize airborne virus exposure within your buildings. My name is Eddie Kelly, and I'm a sensors product specialist here at Belimo, and I'm going to be tag teaming this webinar for you guys with my colleague Frank DiPaolo, who's our specialist on our Zip Economizer product line. All right, so firstly, we have an outline here to give you all an idea of what we're going to be speaking about today as this webinar progresses. We're going to be starting off with an introduction on indoor air quality and virus exposure, and then jump into some of the specifics behind, what exactly is ASHRAE releasing in terms of building and schools being reopened during this current pandemic. Part of these guidelines include inspections and specific checklists to make sure that building occupants remain safe and healthy, which we're also going to be speaking to here. Finally, we'll be connecting the dots between what ASHRAE really is recommending and how can we specifically help here by using Belimo's products. And of course, we're going to be finishing up with a Q&A session. So again, feel free to type questions into the question box as they come up. All right, so as I just mentioned, we first want to talk about indoor air quality and why is it so crucial when it comes to mitigating risk of virus exposure. So again, first and foremost here, the most important part of indoor air quality is without a doubt health and safety. So that being said, as you can imagine, our current COVID pandemic plays an immediate and direct role to really any building's indoor air quality levels. COVID-19 and really any other airborne viruses can actually be spread throughout a facility relatively quickly if the proper precautions are not really taken seriously. So that being said, building automation systems can be upgraded and improved to mitigate the risk of spreading any airborne virus, which of course includes this COVID-19 that we're currently talking about. With HVAC systems in general, you have the ability to schedule, operating hours and different purging of a system as needed, whether it be before occupants come in or after occupants leave. So as this webinar moves on, you're going to hear a couple of recommendations over and over. If you increase ventilation and if you increase filtration within your facility, you can seriously mitigate the risk of virus exposure throughout your system. So all this being said, ASHRAE has published guidelines on reopening facilities during this time of crisis, really focusing on buildings in general and schools and universities. And of course, they also released guidelines on the transportation sector, which we're not really going to be focusing on here today. All right, so again, ASHRAE has released two specific guidelines on reopening facilities. One of the guidelines focuses on reopening buildings in general and making sure that the buildings are ready for occupants to re-enter. And the other guideline focuses on reopening schools and universities in an attempt to really get schools ready for students and staff to go back to work, which is becoming really common here, of course, as we're in September and we're kind of ending the summer season here. This webinar is going to be sent to everyone who signed up. So again, we've included the direct links here to these guidelines on this slide. So speaking on this first building readiness intent, this guideline really focuses on two main or major modes, I guess I can say. One mode being during a pandemic like we have today, and the second mode being after the pandemic, basically focusing on bringing building automation systems kind of back down to a regular operation level. Again, the common themes throughout both of these guidelines is increased ventilation and increased filtration. So in terms of the recommendations for schools and universities, ASHRAE focuses initially on inspections and actually provides physical checklists to go through before these schools are actually reopened. They also give details on new designs and recommendations for new designs to really help mitigate virus exposure. Again, this is current to the current pandemic, but also for if anything in the future were to come up. So again, this guideline as well, just like the building readiness intent, is heavily centered around increasing ventilation and increasing filtration.
So the two guidelines Eddie mentioned are both pretty similar in what they advise. ASHRAE is focusing on health, safety, and improving ventilation to the best of your building's capabilities. The first part being these two overall statements you see on this slide. Inspection and review is a standard routine for any building or facility, but having it part of the guideline is a good reminder of the steps to take and emphasizing maintaining your equipment. The next slides will show what ASHRAE is guiding you to check. In these guidelines, they offer checklists to go through for the process of reopening. Each type of equipment has a different checklist, and I just wanted to show you one of them so you can get a feel of what they say. These are probably things you already cover, but now they are suggesting to do on a monthly basis. The reason is to keep your equipment at a high level of performance to take on new standards for health and safety. So for rooftop units, you can see the overall checklist, and they have checkpoints such as check the control system and devices for evidence of improper operation, and verify control dampers operate properly. Before getting to equipment, the guidelines advise to look at your components. Components can include dampers, valves, and sensors. We saw that for rooftop units, it was important to check for proper damper operation. You'll want to verify that the damper is opening and closing properly without any obstructions. Check for broken linkages and verify your actuator. For control valves, you'll want to verify the operation of them as well. That'll include checking for proper flow, and would also be beneficial to re-evaluate what proper flow for your system is and making sure you are maximizing optimum performance. For sensors, verify operation. Check that it is receiving the proper input and giving the proper output, making sure they haven't failed, and checking that they are in the correct range for your operations. The next step in the guidelines was to review your sequence of operation. Going through and reviewing each step will be beneficial in helping with maximizing performance and possibly having the benefit of creating or upgrading a new sequence for improved ventilation. Here, what you see is a basic sequence in which we'll run through all the different steps. The first step is the room sensor feedback to the controller. It will be important to make sure you are getting an accurate temperature feedback to the controller. Next, you can see that the temperature is currently reading 75 degrees Fahrenheit. If there is then a change in set point to 72 degrees on the controller. The controller is sending a control signal to an actuator. Actuator being a component of the control damper. This also may be a good time to make sure that you have the proper actuator doing the job. For example, if the damper is internal to the building, then you typically would have a fail-in-place actuator. If you are bringing in outside air, you typically want a fail-safe actuator for freeze protection. Once the damper starts moving, there will be feedback sent from the actuator to the controller communicating that it is moving to the signal given. Next, the damper will start moving open, letting in cool air. This will then make the temperature change to 72 degrees. Finally, the room sensor will send feedback to the controller saying the set point and actual are now the same. As stated previously, re-evaluating your sequences should also be done in order to see if there are any changes to be made due to the new guidelines recommendations. This leads us now to go through some of the finer details in the schools and facilities guidelines. These are not all the recommendations, but some of the highlights that are beneficial to cover. The first set of points are for prior to occupancy. There is a recommended temperature range of 68 to 78 degrees and having a relative humidity range of 40 to 60%. The reason being is trying to maintain a human comfort while reducing the spread of airborne pathogens. Next is DCV operation. Your demand control ventilation system should be set to 800 to 1000 ppm. Once that set point is reached in DCV mode, the damper should begin to increase ventilation. Performing an initial air flush of all spaces will be beneficial and cause air change. The goal is to get new air in and old air out, giving a better chance of limiting spread and mold growth. For increased ventilation, the first point is following ASHRAE 62.1 guidelines. As far as dedicated outside air systems and replacing units, you should now make them 150% over code for increased ventilation and give you more of an advantage for air flushes. If there is a pandemic, DCV should be disabled and max outside air should be used until further notice. To help you inform your decisions, high quality sensors should be installed so you're getting an accurate and reliable data for outdoor pollution. That will be extremely beneficial for controlled operations. Next, the guidelines look at during operation hours and purge scheduling. The first recommendation being changing the hours of operation to 6 a.m. to 4 a.m. for all your heating and cooling equipment. One reason for this is to increase ventilation and have as much air coming in and out of your building for a longer period of time to reduce and get rid of bacteria or pathogens. Running your dedicated outside air systems 2 hours before and after is another way to get air change. It will be good to note here that the 2 hours before and after occupancy should factor in all those who enter your building. The last recommendation is for new installations. The designer should designate a purge flush mode. Having this mode gives your building an advantage to minimize virus transmissions as much as possible. If you aren't designing a new installation and you don't have a purge function, it may be beneficial to look at retrofitting your equipment with an economizer that does.
All right, thanks, Frank. So again, guys, as mentioned, we're focusing on two major recommendations here. Increasing ventilation, of course, as Frank's been talking about, as well as increasing and improving your building's filtration levels. So generally speaking, which I'm sure most of you already know, filters are generally used to clean the air. This has always been important, but now, of course, within our current pandemic, filtration levels have become even more crucial to the health and safety of the actual building occupants within the building itself. So typical HVAC filters are rated between MERV 1 and MERV 16, with MERV 16 being able to filter the smallest particles of the fleet there. So with these new guidelines, ASHRAE actually recommends filters to be replaced and upgraded to at least a level MERV 13. So again, all of this being said, even though a MERV 16 filter is the highest rated filter, it can only filter out particles down to 0.3 microns. Just as a reference here, the COVID-19 particles can be as small as 0.06 microns, basically 5 times smaller than the smallest filtered particle within that MERV 16 category. So we're bringing this up not to scare you guys, of course, but to really reinforce, how important it is to also increase your ventilation levels in conjunction with improving your system's filtration. The idea here really is that any pathogens or harmful particles that are not absorbed by the filters themselves, they should be able to go through your system and be expelled and exhausted from the building outside into the atmosphere. So remaining on topic here on the topic of filtration, as you can see, increasing filtration, or as you can imagine, is also going to increase your maintenance intervals. The higher level a filter is, of course, the more particles a filter is going to be able to catch and absorb, which of course means the filter is going to get dirtier quicker and need to be replaced more often. But how do you know? How do you know when it's time to replace the filter? So as a filter inevitably gets dirty, of course, air's not going to be able to move as freely through the filter. So as the filter gets clogged, there's going to be a buildup of pressure on the upstream side of the filter, which is shown on the image here on the right. Differential pressure switches can be used to monitor and alert the BMS system when these filters need to be replaced. Specifically looking at Belimo's 01 APS pressure switch, you can set the differential pressure set point on the sensor itself, and when that set point is reached, of course, due to the filter being clogged, a relay is flipped and a signal is sent to the system saying, hey, maybe it's time to change the filter, or at least go out and take a look at the filter itself. Here at Belimo, we also offer a differential pressure sensor that speaks continuously to your BMS, which can be used to monitor pressure levels throughout different zones really in any application. We're going to be speaking further to these sensors here in a few slides as well.
So how can Belimo help you with the ASHRAE reopening guidelines? We can give you an advantage with your component needs for either new installations or retrofit applications. The Belimo Zip Economizer can be used to help with some of these recommendations and overall help with maximizing free cooling. It can be installed on new equipment or retrofitted. The Zip is unique with its zip code technology, in which you just enter your zip code and it automatically knows what climate zone you're in, what that high limit is for that climate zone, taking away the guesswork associated with the zones and borders. The Zip Economizer also automatically knows what strategy you are using by what you plug into it. So for instance, you might want to consider using a differential enthalpy strategy. So you're looking at relative humidity at both the outside air and return air side of your rooftop unit. Once you plug in two Econ Zip temperature humidity sensors and the Econ Zip 10K sensor to your supply air temperature, it will know that you're using differential enthalpy and you have to go through the settings to change it to that strategy. Also, you can manually adjust if needed or desired for your facility. The energy module, the module plugged in the middle port of the Econ Zip base, will be really beneficial. It has an exhaust fan function, a DCV mode that you can select that 800 to 1000 ppm range, and a purge function. The COM module, the module plugged in on the right port of the Zip base, is where we have BACnet MSTP technology. There are 75 objects within the Zip. A function that can be displayed in your BMS through BACnet is alarms. One of the over 30 alarms in the Zip is if a sensor is out of range or not detected, giving a solution to verifying your components. If you do not have BACnet MSTP, the alarm contact can be used for a remote pilot light to notify people in the space. With all these features, some of the way the Zip Economizer solves the checklist points found in the latest ASHRAE school reopening guidelines are the following. The Zip has adjustable settings and can be maximized to your building and facilities needs. It is also compliant to ASHRAE 90.1, 62.1, and California Title 24. You are able to pick your ppm set point for the CO2 levels with DCV mode with the Econ Zip energy module. Purge functionality with the Econ Zip energy module can be retrofitted onto your equipment to minimize virus transmissions and create an initial air change. With BACnet MSTP, you can have the Economizer running in occupancy mode when needed. The energy module provides an exhaust fan input, so we're getting maximum ventilation in, but also getting stale air and pathogens out. For new installations, the Zip can be used to purge the building as necessary. Belimo also offers ways to improve your component devices with our actuator portfolio and accessories. For actuators, we have fail-safe and non-fail-safe models that range from 18 inch-pounds to 1400 inch-pounds, giving a very wide range of solutions for your control dampers. Some control signals we offer include, but not limited to, are on-off, floating point, VDC, and we have a range for BACnet applications. We have linkages that include foot mount solutions. Also, the ZG-JSL pictured between the two actuators is a great way to solve difficult mounting situations. It has a built-in shaft that allows for direct coupling. Our remote positioners can maximize outdoor airflow by fully overriding the signal being sent and position the damper all the way open if needed. It can also be used in conjunction with the Belimo Zip Economizer. A few ways that the Belimo actuators and accessories offer solutions to the most recent school guidelines include our actuators are maintenance-free and can be easily verified for proper operation. With a wide variety of control signals and torque ranges, we can make sure that your control damper is running to its maximized performance. Our linkages can help provide unique solutions in mounting your actuator. And our remote positioners can adjust any control damper to induce maximum possible outside air by overriding the signal being sent to the actuator, making an easy to use solution.
All right, thanks, Frank. So along with the economizer and actuators that Frank's been talking about, here at Belimo, we also have a sensors portfolio that can really help your facilities meet these new ASHRAE recommendations. Okay, so we've got a full lineup of air quality sensors that support duct, outdoor, and most recently room-mounted applications. Another huge benefit here is that on all of our humidity sensors, you have the option of selecting either relative humidity as an output or dew point on the device itself, either through jumpers or NFC communication. Within our duct and outdoor humidity sensors, you're also actually able to choose between absolute humidity as well as enthalpy, which means on those devices themselves, you've got relative humidity, dew point, absolute humidity, and enthalpy all selectable within the same device. This is now a really important feature because as of last year, ASHRAE has recently updated their 62.1 guidelines, where they're now recommending controlling humidity based on dew point, as opposed to the way it used to be, which was a recommendation to control relative humidity. So again, not only is our air quality sensors here to help your facilities meet these new readiness guidelines, but again, they'll also help your facility, kind of come up to speed with this new ASHRAE 62.1 update. So jumping back here regarding the subject at hand, some of these current recommendations in these two guidelines can be met by using our sensors, like keeping zones in classrooms to temperatures between 68 and 78 degrees, as well as the specific call out on maintaining relative humidity levels between 40 and 60%. These sensors also help meet the other recommendations revolved around CO2 levels and new classroom design criteria, specifically during the winter and summer seasons. All right, so as mentioned before as well here, we also offer a line of pressure sensors that'll help bring your system up to speed on these new ASHRAE recommendations. So increasing ventilation in general is going to have really a direct effect on the pressure levels throughout your facilities. So again, by using our 22 ADP differential pressure sensors, you can monitor and control the pressure across various zones throughout your building. We've actually recently released a pickup plate for mounting directly on walls, which is perfect for monitoring pressure in classrooms, hospitals, nursing rooms, things like that. And also can be used to prevent negative pressures, again, as brought up in the guidelines here. So seeing that we're currently in a pandemic mode, every indoor facility really needs to be treated like a critical application. And for these types of environments, we offer what we call a true auto zero function on these sensors. Basically what this does is it gives these sensors a self-calibrating feature that really calibrates itself every 10 minutes, allowing the sensor to remain true and accurate to its original values. And it really does give like a set and forget type of feature here. Okay, so on top of the negative pressure call out, these sensors really do help with the new design guidelines around isolation and protective rooms as well. And of course, part of our product line is our differential pressure switches, which helps fulfill the new needs for improving, upgrading, and monitoring your building's actual filtration levels. All right. So there's another item here that I wanted to speak to everyone about here in the top left. We also offer a low temperature detection sensor that helps prevent certain areas of your system from freezing up. So unfortunately, as kind of we all know now, it's looking like we're going to be, in this pandemic mode well into the winter months. So using these freeze stat sensors, it's going to be crucial when it comes to an increased outdoor air intake like ASHRAE recommends, especially during these colder winter months. All right, so this brings us up to our last slide here. And again, we really want to reiterate that the ultimate goal for everybody here is really to do our best to keep everyone healthy and safe within all of our facilities. The main premise, the main goal behind these guidelines is really to minimize risk when it comes to our current situation, as well as any future issues that do come up. So again, by following these recently released ASHRAE guidelines and using some of the products that we've mentioned here today, I mean, we could really all together make a big difference in all of our buildings' indoor air quality. So this about brings us now to our Q&A session. Again, I appreciate you guys joining us. Thanks again. And as Ron mentioned, any questions that we can't answer or get to, it will absolutely be answered via email after this webinar. So that being said, Ron, any questions?
Thank you very much, Eddie and Frank. We do have some questions that come in. Before we begin, can I please remind you to follow Belimo on social media, and you receive all kinds of great information on there. And we do have some questions that have come in. The first question is, you mentioned selecting relative humidity or dew points on the Belimo sensors. Do these have different part numbers, or do all sensors have this option?
That's a good question. So actually all of our humidity sensors, regardless of the part number, are going to be able to have the selectable output of dew point or relative humidity. On the actual duct and pipe offering, we also have the absolute humidity inclusion as well as enthalpy. So we have a webinar scheduled for, I believe, October 28th on this ASHRAE 62.1 update, which we'll be going into details behind the actual humidity sensors. So I'm pretty sure everyone that's registered here is going to get an email on that as well for registration. So, you know, any further information or details regarding humidity sensors will absolutely be covered next month.
Thank you. Next question, does the ZIP recognize Canadian zip codes?
Yes, the Zip Economizer recognizes all regions in Canada and all their zip codes. If you do need to change your temperature from Fahrenheit to Celsius, you can as well. And yeah, you'll be all set.
Okay. What kind of outputs are available on Belimo's room sensors?
Ooh, good question. So the room sensors, we've got a passive line. On the passive line, we've got a PT1000, NTC 10K2, 10K3, as well as a 20K. On the active side, they're actually NFC selectable on the device. So through the NFC selection, you've got a voltage output, 2 to 10 volts, 0 to 10 volts, and I believe 0 to 5 volts. And also we offer MP bus on the active units as well.
Okay. Do all zips have BACnet MS/TP functionality?
So not all Belimo Zip Economizers have firmware 2.0, which has the BACnet MST functionality. Those started shipping about last October. If you go into your monitor live conditions, you can see what firmware version you have. If it is below 2.0, then it doesn't have it, but everything 2.0 and above does.
Thank you. We have time for 2 more questions. What kind of enclosure ratings are available with Belimo sensor lines?
So within our duct and pipe offering, our standard sensors are all NEMA 4X rated. Basically, any of the orange housings that you see, they're all NEMA 4X rated. The outdoor sensors don't have the orange housing; they have a gray housing, which is the idea of, you know, nobody wants a brand new building to have an orange sensor on the outside. But again, all of Belimo's standard duct and pipe offering sensors, they're all NEMA 4X rated as standard.
Okay, we'll take one last question. What time of thermostat do you need for the ZIP?
The thermostat that you need for a ZIP is a 2-stage cooling thermostat. That's for integrated cooling.
Okay, thank you very much, guys. Remember, please, that your answers will get answered via email once this webinar is over by Frank and Eddie if we did not get to it today. And I'd like to thank you for attending today's webinar, as well as thanking our presenters, Frank and Eddie. If you would like a copy of the webinar or have any questions, please email training@us.belimo.com. And also, please join us for our next webinar, which will be on October 2nd, for a discussion with Larry Felker on fire and smoke damper actuator inspection and replacement. Thank you, everyone, and have a great rest of your day.
Thanks, guys.